The gunshot split the afternoon air like a thunderclap, and Katherine Blake threw herself flat against the floorboards of the stagecoach as splinters exploded from the doorframe inches from her head. Bandits! The driver screamed from above, his voice cracking with terror before another shot rang out and his body tumbled past her window, hitting the dusty road with a sickening thud. Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs as the stagecoach lurched wildly, the horses screaming in panic. She clutched her carpetbag to her chest, her knuckles white, as the unmanned coach careened off the rutted trail. The other passenger, an elderly merchant who had been dozing moments before, was thrown against the opposite wall, his head cracking against the wood before he slumped unconscious. Outside, she could hear the thunder of approaching hooves, rough laughter, and shouted commands she couldn't quite make out over the chaos. The coach tilted dangerously as one wheel hit a rut, and Katherine braced herself against the seat, her new teaching position in White Oaks, New Mexico, suddenly seeming very far away and very unimportant. The door was ripped open, and a man with a dirty bandana covering half his face leaned in, his breath reeking of whiskey and tobacco. Well, what do we have here?" His eyes raked over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "A pretty little bird all alone." "Please," Katherine managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Take whatever you want, just let us go." The bandit laughed, reaching for her arm when suddenly his expression changed. His eyes went wide and he jerked backward, a red stain blooming on his shoulder. The crack of a rifle reached her ears a split second later. More gunfire erupted, and Katherine pressed herself into the corner of the coach, covering her head with her arms. She heard men shouting, horses neighing, and the continuous crack of weapons firing. It seemed to last an eternity, though it couldn't have been more than a minute or two, then silence. Katherine held her breath, afraid to move, afraid to even hope. Footsteps approached the coach, and she squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for whatever came next. "Miss, are you hurt?" The voice was deep, calm, concerned. Nothing like the rough snarl of the bandit. Katherine opened her eyes slowly and found herself looking up at a man framed in the doorway of the coach. He was tall, she could tell even with him crouching, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. A dusty brown hat sat on his head and a rifle was slung casually over his shoulder. Despite the violence that had just occurred, his face held only kindness. I am not hurt," she managed, her voice coming out as barely more than a whisper. "Can you step out? I need to check on your fellow passenger there." He offered his hand, rough and calloused from hard work, but gentle as he helped her down from the coach. Katherine's legs shook as her feet hit the ground, and she would have fallen if not for his steady grip on her elbow. She looked around at the scene before her. 3 men lay sprawled in the dirt, clearly dead or dying. The horses that had pulled her coach were 100 yards down the road, finally coming to a stop. And there, a short distance away, was a beautiful chestnut horse, saddled and waiting patiently. "The driver?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "I am sorry, miss. He was gone before I got here." The cowboy climbed into the coach to examine the merchant. After a moment he emerged. "This fellow has a nasty bump on his head, but he will live. We should get him to a doctor, though." "White Oaks," Katherine said. "I was traveling to White Oaks. Is it far?" "About 15 miles northwest." He studied her face for a moment. "You are the new school teacher. I heard someone was coming from back east." "Boston," Katherine confirmed. "I am Katherine Blake. Brett Galloway, miss. I have a ranch about 5 miles from town." He tipped his hat to her, a gesture that seemed oddly formal given the circumstances. "I will ride with you to town. It is not safe out here alone, especially not after this." Katherine looked at the bodies again and felt her stomach turn. She had left Boston seeking adventure. seeking to make a difference in the rough frontier town. She had imagined teaching eager children their letters and numbers, had pictured herself as a pioneer of education and civilization. She had not imagined violence, death, and the particular shade of red that blood turned when it soaked into New Mexico dust. "Miss Blake," Brett's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "We should move soon. The sun will set in a few hours, and we want to reach town well before dark." "Yes, of course." She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. She had not come all this way to fall apart at the first sign of trouble. "What should we do?" Brett worked efficiently, his movements economical and practiced. He rounded up the coach horses and brought them back, calming them with soft words and steady hands. He checked the coach's wheels and axle, declaring it road-worthy despite the wild ride. He fashioned a makeshift bed for the merchant inside, padding it with blankets from Katherine's trunk. "I am going to tie my horse to the back and drive the coach myself," he explained. "It would be faster if I rode, but I cannot leave you unprotected, and we need to get this gentleman to town." "You do not have to do this," Katherine said, though she was profoundly grateful that he was. "I am sure you have your own business to attend to." Brett looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. It was not pity exactly, but a kind of understanding, as if he could see past her brave front to the frightened woman beneath. "There is nothing more important than seeing you safely to town, Miss Blake," he said simply. "Now, if you will climb aboard, we will be on our way." The ride to White Oaks was nothing like the journey Katherine had been on before the attack. Brett drove carefully, mindful of the injured man inside, but steadily. Katherine sat beside him on the driver's bench, partly because there was more room there than in the coach with the unconscious merchant, and partly because the open air helped settle her nerves. The landscape rolled past them, vast and open in a way that still startled her. In Boston, there had always been buildings, people, the sense of civilization pressing in from all sides. Here, the sky stretched endlessly overhead, the deepest blue she had ever seen. The land was dotted with scrub brush and occasional stands of juniper, and in the distance, mountains rose against the horizon. "Is it always like this?" she asked after a while, unable to bear the silence any longer. "The bandits, I mean, the violence." Brett was quiet for a moment, guiding the horses around a rocky patch in the road. "It is not safe country," he said finally. "But it is not always like this, either. Those men were part of the Dalton gang. They have been causing trouble up and down the territory for months now. The marshal has been trying to track them down. You knew who they were," recognized one of them. "Pete Dalton, the one I shot first." He glanced at her. "I am sorry you had to see that, Miss Blake. I know it is not what a lady should have to witness." "You saved my life," Katherine said softly. "Those men, they were going to." She could not finish the sentence, could not put into words what she had seen in that bandit's eyes. "They will not hurt anyone now," Brett said, his voice hard. Then, gentler, "You are safe. I give you my word." And strangely, impossibly, Katherine believed him. This man, this stranger she had met less than an hour ago, made her feel safer than she had in weeks of traveling. Since leaving Boston, she had been surrounded by people, fellow passengers and innkeepers and stage drivers, but she had felt utterly alone. Now, on this empty road with bodies left behind them and an unconscious man in the coach, she felt protected. "How did you come to be there?" she asked. "On that road at exactly the right moment." "I was heading into town myself," Brett explained. "Needed supplies, and I had some business with the bank. I heard the gunshots and rode to investigate. Seemed like Providence that I happened along when I did." "Providence indeed," Katherine murmured. She studied his profile as he drove, noting the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes constantly scanned the horizon, alert for danger. There was a strength to him, a capability that went beyond the physical. He was a man who knew his place in this wild land, who had carved out a life here through sheer determination. "What made you come out here?" Brett asked, startling her from her observations. "Boston to White Oaks is quite a journey." Katherine considered how to answer. "I wanted to make a difference," she said finally. "In Boston, I was teaching at a private school for girls. The students were all from wealthy families, and while I loved teaching, I felt like I was not really needed. They would have had good educations regardless. But out here, on the frontier, there are children who might never learn to read if someone does not come to teach them." "That is a noble reason," Brett said, and she heard genuine respect in his voice. "Though I hope you do not come to regret it after today." "I will admit, I did not expect quite so much excitement on my first day," Katherine said with a shaky laugh. "But I am not so easily frightened off. My mother always said I was stubborn as a mule." Brett's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "Something tells me that stubbornness will serve you well out here." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the coach wheels, the steady clip of hooves on the hard-packed road, and the occasional call of a bird. The sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Katherine had never seen in the smoke-hazed skies of Boston. "It is beautiful," she said softly, almost to herself. "That it is," Brett agreed. "I have traveled some, seen a bit of the country, but there is nowhere I would rather be than right here. This land gets into your blood if you let it." "Have you always ranched?" "My father had a small spread in Texas. I learned the work from him. When he died, I sold the place and came north, looking for land of my own. That was 5 years ago. It has been hard work, building up the herd, making the ranch pay, but it is mine. That means something." Katherine heard the pride in his voice and understood it. She had left behind everything familiar to make her own mark on the world. In that, perhaps, they were not so different. The merchant in the coach groaned, and Katherine turned to peer through the window behind them. "I think he is waking up," she said. Brett nodded. "We are about 5 miles out now. Not much longer." True to his word, they crested a rise about 30 minutes later, and Katherine saw White Oaks spread out below them. It was larger than she had expected, a proper town with what looked like several streets of buildings. She could make out a church steeple, the distinctive false fronts of shops, and numerous houses scattered around the main street. "The doctor's office is at the far end of town," Brett said. "We will take your friend there first." As they rolled down the main street, Katherine was acutely aware of the stares they drew. People stopped on the wooden sidewalks to watch them pass, and she realized what a sight they must make. The damaged stagecoach, Brett in the driver's seat instead of the regular driver, and her sitting beside him, dusty and disheveled. The doctor, a brisk middle-aged man named Harrison, helped them carry the merchant inside. While he examined the patient, Brett took Katherine's bags from the coach and loaded them onto his horse. "Where are you staying?" he asked. I am not sure," Katherine admitted. "I was told there would be arrangements made, but I do not know the details." "The hotel, then, for now. The Galloway house. No relation to me, despite the name. It is respectable, and the owner, Mrs. Miller, is a good woman. She will see you settled." They walked side by side down the street, Brett leading his horse with one hand and carrying her heaviest bag with the other. Katherine carried her carpet-bag, the one she had clutched during the attack, and tried not to notice the curious looks they received. Mrs. Miller turned out to be a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s who took one look at Katherine's pale face and dusty clothes and immediately sprang into action. "You poor dear. Come in, come in. I heard about the stage being attacked. Is it true? Are you hurt?" "I am fine, Thanks to Mr. Galloway, Katherine said. Mrs. Miller's eyes darted to Brett, then back to Katherine, and something knowing flickered in her expression. Well, Mr. Galloway is quite the hero then, is he not? Come, dear, let me show you to a room. You will want a bath and rest, I am sure. Actually, Katherine said, I need to find the school board chairman. I am supposed to meet with him about my teaching position. That would be Josiah Martin. But child, that can surely wait until tomorrow. You have had quite an ordeal. Katherine shook her head firmly. I would prefer to settle the matter today, if possible. I do not want there to be any concern about my commitment to the position. Brett, who had been standing quietly by, spoke up. Josiah's house is 3 blocks over. I can take you there, if you are sure you are up to it. I am sure, Katherine said, though in truth she felt exhausted down to her bones. Mrs. Miller tutted disapprovingly but showed them where to stow Katherine's bags. I will have that bath ready for when you return, she promised. Josiah Martin was a stern-looking man with gray hair and wire-rimmed spectacles. He listened gravely as Brett explained what had happened on the road, his frown deepening with each detail. A terrible thing, he said when Brett finished. Terrible. Those Dalton boys have been a plague on this territory. I am glad you came along when you did, Brett. As am I, Katherine said. But I want to assure you, Mr. Martin, that this incident has not changed my intentions. I am still very much committed to teaching here in White Oaks. Josiah studied her for a long moment, and Katherine lifted her chin, meeting his gaze steadily. Finally, he nodded. I can see you are made of stern stuff, Miss Blake. That will serve you well. The position is still yours, of course. School begins in 2 weeks, which will give you time to settle in and prepare. The schoolhouse is on the east end of town. I will take you there tomorrow to show you around. Thank you, Mr. Martin. I appreciate your confidence in me. As they left Josiah's house, the sun was setting, painting the dusty street in golden light. Katherine felt the day catching up with her all at once, a wave of exhaustion and delayed shock that made her sway slightly. Brett's hand was immediately at her elbow, steadying her. You need rest, he said, concern clear in his voice. I am fine, Katherine protested, but her voice lacked conviction. No, you are not, and there is no shame in that. You have been through more today than most people face in a year. He guided her gently back toward the hotel. Mrs. Miller will have that bath ready, and you need food and sleep. Katherine did not have the energy to argue. When they reached the hotel, Mrs. Miller confirmed that a bath was indeed waiting, and she promised to send up a tray of food. Brett lingered in the lobby, his hat in his hands, clearly reluctant to leave. Will you be all right? He asked. Yes, Katherine said, and this time she meant it. Thank you, Mr. Galloway, for everything. You saved my life today, and I will never forget that. Brett, he corrected gently. Please, just Brett, and I am glad I was there to help. If you need anything at all, the ranch is 5 miles due south. Anyone in town can give you directions. Brett, Katherine repeated, tasting his name, and you must call me Katherine. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his serious face. Katherine, it suits you. How so? It is a proper name, strong, classic. His blue eyes held hers for a moment that stretched longer than it should. Get some rest, Katherine. I will check on you tomorrow if I may. I would like that, Katherine said softly. She watched from the window of her room as he rode away, his tall figure easily recognizable even in the growing darkness. Then she turned to the copper bathtub that Mrs. Miller had prepared, steam still rising from the water, and allowed herself to finally let down her guard. As she sank into the hot water, Katherine felt the tension of the day begin to release. She scrubbed the dust from her skin and hair, watching the water turn murky. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a thick robe Mrs. Miller had provided, She found a tray waiting with stew, fresh bread, and apple pie. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, her mind replaying the events of the day. The gunshots, the blood, the terror in her chest. And then Brett, appearing like something out of a dime novel, brave and capable and kind. She had never believed in love at first sight. In Boston, she had been courted by several respectable men, and while she had liked them well enough, she had never felt any particular spark. Love, she had believed, was something that grew slowly, built on shared interests and compatible temperaments. But as she lay in the strange bed in the strange town, it was not the attack she thought about. It was the way Brett's hand had felt, steady and sure as he helped her from the coach. The calm certainty in his voice when he promised she was safe. The concern in his eyes as he looked at her, as if she mattered, as if she was important. Sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and full of dreams. The next morning, Katherine woke to sunlight streaming through the lace curtains. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was. Then it all came rushing back and she sat up, her heart pounding. But with the morning light came clarity. She was alive. She was in White Oaks. She had a job to do and a life to build. What had happened yesterday was terrifying, yes, but it was over. She could not let it define her time here. After dressing in a fresh outfit, a practical dark blue dress suitable for a schoolteacher, Katherine went downstairs to find the dining room bustling with activity. Several guests were taking breakfast, and the smell of coffee and bacon made her stomach growl, reminding her that despite the tray last night, she had barely eaten in 24 hours. "There you are, dear." Mrs. Miller hurried over, guiding Katherine to a table. "How did you sleep?" "You have more color in your cheeks this morning, I am pleased to see." "Much better, thank you. You have been very kind." "Nonsense. It is my pleasure to help our new schoolteacher." Mrs. Miller leaned in conspiratorially. "And it does not hurt that you arrived in such dramatic fashion with our most eligible bachelor." Katherine felt her cheeks warm. "Mr. Galloway was very helpful, but I am sure he was simply being a gentleman." "Oh, I am sure he was," Mrs. Miller agreed, but her eyes twinkled with amusement. "Still, Brett Galloway has had half the single women in this town setting their caps for him since he arrived, and he has never shown interest in any of them. So you arriving together like that, well, it has certainly set tongues wagging." "We did not arrive together," Katherine protested. "He rescued me from bandits and escorted me to town for my safety." "Of course, dear, of course." Mrs. Miller patted her hand. "Now, what can I get you for breakfast?" After a hearty meal of eggs, bacon, and the fluffiest biscuits Katherine had ever tasted, she felt ready to face the day. Josiah Martin arrived as promised to show her the schoolhouse, and Katherine followed him through the morning bustle of White Oaks. The town was even more impressive in daylight than it had seemed the evening before. The main street was lined with well-maintained buildings. A general store, a bank, a saloon, a newspaper office, and various other establishments. People called out greetings to Josiah, and many of them stared at Katherine with undisguised curiosity. "You will find White Oaks is a friendly town," Josiah said as they walked. "We have about 500 residents now and growing. The mines have brought prosperity, and with that comes the need for civilization. A school, a proper church, law and order." The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a neat white building with a bell tower and a covered porch. Inside was a single large room with rows of desks, a wood stove in the corner, and a slate board at the front. "It is not fancy," Josiah admitted, "but it is sound. We built it 2 years ago with the hope of attracting a teacher. We have had a succession of young men come through, but none stayed more than a few months. We are hoping you will be different." "I intend to stay," Katherine said firmly. She walked around the room, running her hand over the desks, examining the books stacked on a shelf in the corner. "How many students can I expect?" "Approximately 25, ranging in age from 6 to 14. Some of the older boys will only come during the winter months when they are not needed for ranch work." Josiah handed her a list of names. "These are the families with school-age children." Katherine studied the list, committing the names to memory. "And what will I be teaching?" "Reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography at a minimum. Some of these children have never been to school before, so you will have your work cut out for you." A challenge, Katherine thought, but the kind she had been seeking. "When can I start?" "School officially begins 2 weeks from Monday, but you are welcome to come in whenever you like to prepare." Josiah hesitated, then added, "Miss Blake, I must tell you that there were some on the school board who were skeptical about hiring a woman teacher. They felt a man would have better authority over the older boys, but I convinced them to give you a chance. I hope you will not make me regret it." "You will not," Katherine promised. "I may be a woman, Mr. Martin, but I am a good teacher. Those children will learn and they will behave, or they will answer to me." Josiah's stern face softened into something almost like a smile. "I believe you, Miss Blake. Welcome to White Oaks." After Josiah left, Katherine spent several hours in the schoolhouse, taking inventory of supplies, planning lessons, and beginning to imagine the space filled with students. She was so absorbed in her work that she did not hear the door open. "Hard at work already, I see." Katherine spun around to find Brett standing in the doorway, hat in hand, the sunlight behind him creating a kind of halo effect that made her breath catch. "Brett, I did not expect to see you today." "I told you I would check on you," he said, stepping inside. "How are you feeling?" "Much better. Mrs. Miller took excellent care of me." Katherine set down the stack of books she had been organizing. "And you? Any trouble after yesterday?" The marshal wanted my statement about what happened. They had already received word about the attack from Doc Harrison. The bodies were collected and identified. It was the Dalton gang, as I suspected. "Will there be trouble for you for having shot them?" Brett shook his head. "They were wanted men and they were in the process of committing a crime. No one will question it." He walked further into the room, looking around with interest. "So this is where you will be working?" "Yes, it is a good space. I am eager to meet the students." "You will do well," Brett said with certainty. "I can tell. How can you possibly know that? You have known me less than a day." "I saw how you handled yourself yesterday. You were terrified, understandably so, but you did not fall apart. You stayed strong. That takes character." He met her eyes. "And I see how you look at this place, these supplies. You care. That matters more than anything." Katherine felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "That is kind of you to say. It is only the truth." Brett turned his hat in his hands, suddenly seeming uncertain. "Katherine, I was wondering if you might allow me to take you to dinner this evening. There is a restaurant here in town, the Silver Star. Nothing fancy, but the food is good and it is respectable." Katherine's heart skipped a beat. "Are you asking to court me, Brett Galloway?" "I suppose I am," he admitted, a flush creeping up his neck. "I know it is fast, and if you think it is too soon, I will understand. But I have not been able to stop thinking about you since yesterday. I would like to get to know you better, if you are amenable." In Boston, Katherine would have been scandalized by such a quick proposal of courtship. There were rules about these things, protocols to be followed, but this was not Boston, and Brett was not like any of the men she had known back east. "I would like that very much," she said softly. Brett's face transformed with his smile. "Wonderful. Shall I call for you at 6? 6 would be perfect." After he left, Katherine pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks and laughed at herself. 24 hours ago, she had been a spinster schoolteacher from Boston, traveling alone to an uncertain future. Now she was being courted by a handsome cowboy in a frontier town. Life, she thought, was nothing if not unpredictable. She returned to the hotel in the early afternoon and found Mrs. Miller positively vibrating with excitement. "Word is all over town that Brett Galloway is taking you to dinner at the Silver Star," she announced. "You will need something nice to wear." "I have several dresses," Katherine began, but Mrs. Miller waved her hand dismissively. "Let me see them. After reviewing Katherine's wardrobe, Mrs. Miller declared the green silk dinner dress suitable, though she insisted on pressing it herself and lending Katherine a cameo brooch that had belonged to her mother. "You want to look your best, dear. Half the women in town will be green with envy." "It is just dinner," Katherine protested, but she could not quite keep the smile from her face. When Brett arrived promptly at 6, Katherine was waiting in the lobby, wearing the green dress with her dark hair pinned up in a style that showed off her slender neck. The look on Brett's face when he saw her made all of Mrs. Miller's fussing worthwhile. "You look beautiful," he said, offering his arm. "You look quite handsome yourself," Katherine replied, noting that he had changed into a clean shirt and vest, his hair still damp from washing. The Silver Star was indeed nothing fancy, just a simple restaurant with checkered tablecloths and wildflowers in mason jars on each table. But it was clean and cheerful, and the smells coming from the kitchen made Katherine's mouth water. They were shown to a corner table, slightly removed from the other diners, which afforded them a measure of privacy. Still, Katherine was acutely aware of the interested glances cast their way. "The whole town is watching us," she murmured as they sat down. "Let them watch," Brett said. "I am proud to be seen with you." Over plates of roast beef, mashed potatoes, and fresh vegetables they talked. Brett told her about his ranch, the Broken G, and the herd he was building. He spoke of the challenges of ranching in New Mexico, the constant worry about water and grass, the threat of rustlers and predators. "It sounds difficult," Katherine said. "It is. But it is also rewarding. When I ride out in the morning and see my cattle grazing, when I watch a calf take its first steps, when I know that everything I have is the result of my own work, there is a satisfaction in that." "I think I understand," Katherine said. "It is how I feel about teaching. When a child who has struggled suddenly understands a concept, when you see their face light up with comprehension, it makes all the difficult days worthwhile." "Exactly." Brett reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The contact sent a jolt through Katherine, electric and warm. "I knew you would understand." They talked late into the evening, long after their plates had been cleared away. Katherine told him about growing up in Boston, the youngest daughter of a widowed seamstress who had worked her fingers raw to ensure her children had opportunities. She spoke of her love of learning, how she had devoured every book she could get her hands on, how a kind teacher had noticed her potential and helped her get into normal school. "My mother was so proud when I got my teaching certificate," Katherine said softly. "She died 2 years ago, but I think she would be pleased to know I am out here, doing something meaningful." "I am sure she would be," Brett said. His thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "My own mother died when I was young. My father raised me and my sister on his own. It was not easy, but he did his best. You have a sister, had. Margaret died of fever when she was 16. That was 12 years ago now, but I still miss her." "I am sorry," Katherine said, squeezing his hand. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, connected by shared grief and understanding. Then Brett said, "It is getting late. I should walk you back to the hotel." The night air was cool as they strolled through the quiet streets. Overhead, stars blazed in a way Katherine had never seen in Boston, where gaslight and smoke obscured the sky. Here, The Milky Way stretched across the heavens like a river of light. "It is breathtaking," Katherine whispered. "Yes," Brett agreed, but when she glanced at him, he was looking at her, not the sky. At the hotel door they lingered, neither wanting the evening to end. Finally, Brett said, "May I see you again? Perhaps on Sunday after church. I would like that. Then I will count the hours." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Good night, Katherine." "Good night, Brett." Katherine floated up the stairs to her room, her heart singing. Mrs. Miller, who had been waiting up, took one look at her face and beamed. "I knew it," she crowed. "That man is smitten with you, dear. Absolutely smitten." And Katherine, practical, sensible Katherine Blake of Boston, could only smile and agree because she was quite certain she was equally smitten with him. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Katherine spent her days at the schoolhouse, preparing lessons and organizing supplies. She met some of the families whose children would be attending and found them welcoming, if somewhat reserved. The mothers were pleased to have a woman teacher, someone who could serve as a proper role model for their daughters. In the evenings and on Sundays, she saw Brett. They took long walks around town, had dinners at the Silver Star, and attended church together, causing quite a stir among the congregation. Brett introduced her to his ranch hands and showed her around the Broken G. She rode beside him through his land, learning to appreciate the stark beauty of the New Mexico landscape. And slowly, surely, Katherine felt herself falling in love. It was different from anything she had imagined. Love, she discovered, was the way Brett always positioned himself between her and any potential danger. It was how he listened when she talked about her teaching plans, offering thoughtful suggestions. It was the gentle patience with which he taught her to ride better, to read the land, to see the life teeming in what had first appeared to be empty desert. Love was also the way her heart leaped when she saw him riding toward town, the way his smile could brighten her entire day, the way his hand felt warm and strong in hers. The first day of school arrived with autumn crispness in the air. Katherine woke early, her stomach fluttering with nerves and excitement. She dressed carefully in a practical gray dress, pinned her hair into a neat bun, and walked to the schoolhouse in the golden morning light. The students began arriving shortly after 8. Some came on foot, others on horseback or in wagons with older siblings. They ranged from tiny 6-year-olds to nearly grown young men, all eyeing her with curiosity and varying degrees of suspicion. Katherine stood on the schoolhouse steps and greeted each one by name, having memorized the list Josiah had given her. When the school bell rang at 8:30, she had 23 students seated at the desks, watching her with expectant faces. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "My name is Miss Blake, and I am pleased to be your teacher. I know that some of you have attended school before, and some of you are here for the first time. Regardless of your experience, we are all going to learn together this year." She outlined her expectations clearly: respect for others, hard work, and honesty. Then she distributed slate boards and chalk and began assessing where each student was in their learning. It quickly became apparent that the students' abilities varied wildly. Some of the younger children could already read simple words, while a few of the older ones struggled with their letters. Katherine made mental notes, already planning how to group them for instruction. The first day passed smoothly, though by the time 3 o'clock arrived and the students filed out, Katherine was exhausted. Teaching 23 students of different ages and abilities was far more challenging than her work in Boston had been. She was erasing the blackboard when Brett appeared in the doorway. "How was your first day?" "Overwhelming," Katherine admitted, setting down the eraser. "But good, I think. The children are bright and they seem eager to learn. I never doubted it would go well." He stepped inside, looking around at the empty classroom. "I brought something for you." From behind his back, he produced a small bouquet of wildflowers, tied with a simple ribbon. "They are not much, but I picked them this morning on the ranch." "They are beautiful," Katherine said softly, taking the flowers. They were simple, honest blooms, purple asters, yellow rabbitbrush, white evening primrose. "Thank you, Brett." "I was thinking," he said, suddenly looking uncertain in a way she had rarely seen from him. "Saturday is the town dance. It is held monthly in the community hall. Would you do me the honor of accompanying me? A dance. I did not know the town had such things." "We do. It is an opportunity for folks to socialize, to celebrate. There is music, dancing, food. It is quite enjoyable." "Then I would love to go with you," Katherine said. Brett's face lit up. "Wonderful. I will call for you at 7. After he left, Katherine held the wildflowers to her nose, breathing in their faint, sweet scent. She had been in White Oaks for just over 2 weeks, and already it felt more like home than Boston ever had. The week passed quickly, each day bringing new challenges and small victories. A shy girl named Emma finally read an entire sentence aloud, her face glowing with pride. 2 boys who had been fighting learned to settle their differences with words. A teenage student named Jacob, who had been sullen and resistant at first, showed an unexpected aptitude for mathematics that Katherine was eager to nurture. By Saturday, Katherine was ready for a break from lesson planning and grading. Mrs. Miller helped her dress for the dance, lending her a beautiful blue gown that brought out the color of Katherine's eyes. "Brett Galloway will not be able to take his eyes off you, Mrs. Miller predicted, adjusting the lace at Katherine's shoulders. When Brett arrived, dressed in a clean suit that made him look sophisticated yet still ruggedly handsome, Katherine saw that Mrs. Miller had been right. His eyes widened when he saw her, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. "You are stunning," he finally managed. "You clean up rather well yourself," Katherine teased, though her heart was racing. The community hall was already crowded when they arrived, filled with what seemed like half the town. A small group of musicians was setting up in the corner. A fiddle, a guitar, and a man with a harmonica. Tables along one wall groaned under the weight of food contributions from various families. Brett kept Katherine's hand in his as they navigated through the crowd. He introduced her to people whose names blurred together in Katherine's mind. Ranchers and their wives, shopkeepers, miners, the blacksmith, the newspaper editor. Everyone was friendly, welcoming her to White Oaks and praising Brett's heroism in rescuing her. When the music started, Brett led her onto the makeshift dance floor. Katherine had been taught to dance in Boston, formal steps in formal ballrooms, but this was different. The music was lively, the steps less rigid, and Brett guided her through the movements with easy confidence. "You are a good dancer," she said as he spun her. "My mother insisted I learn, said it was the mark of a gentleman. I thought it was foolish at the time, but I am grateful now." They danced several dances, only taking breaks to catch their breath and sample the food. Katherine was having more fun than she could remember having in years. This was life, she thought, real and vibrant and full of joy. During a slower song, Brett pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers. They swayed gently to the music, and Katherine felt surrounded by his warmth, his strength, his presence. "Katherine," he said softly, his lips near her ear, "these past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life." "Mine too," she whispered back. "I know it is soon, perhaps too soon, but I cannot help how I feel." He pulled back slightly to look at her, his blue eyes intense. "I am falling in love with you. No, that is not right. I have already fallen. I love you, Katherine Blake." Katherine's breath caught. This was it, the moment that would define everything. She could be cautious, could tell him they needed more time, could retreat behind propriety and convention, but she did not want to be cautious. She wanted to be brave. She wanted this man, this life, this love. I love you too, Brett. I think I have since that first day when you helped me from the coach. Brett's face transformed with joy. Right there in front of half the town, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and perfect, and Katherine felt her entire world shift on its axis. When they broke apart, she was dimly aware of applause and laughter from the people around them, but it did not matter. Nothing mattered except the man standing before her and the love shining in his eyes. "Marry me," Brett said, the words more plea than question. "I know we have not known each other long, but out here, time moves differently. Life is uncertain. I do not want to waste a single moment. Marry me, Katherine." "Yes," Katherine said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." More applause erupted around them, and suddenly they were surrounded by well-wishers, people slapping Brett on the back and hugging Katherine. Mrs. Miller was crying happy tears, and even stern Josiah Martin was smiling. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and celebration. When Brett finally walked Katherine back to the hotel, the stars overhead seemed to shine even brighter than usual. "How quickly do you want to marry?" Brett asked as they stood at the hotel door. "I would marry you tomorrow if it were possible," Katherine admitted. "But I should finish out at least the first term of school. I made a commitment to those children. Of course, I would not ask you to break your word." Brett thought for a moment. "What about Christmas? That gives you 3 months to prepare, and the children will be on holiday from school." "Christmas," Katherine repeated, savoring the word. "That sounds perfect. Then at Christmas you will become Mrs. Brett Galloway." He kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, full of promise. "I love you, Katherine. I love you too." The next 3 months were a whirlwind of teaching, wedding planning, and falling ever deeper in love. Katherine moved through her days in a haze of happiness. Her students thrived under her instruction, and she found profound satisfaction in watching them grow and learn. In her free time, she worked with Mrs. Miller and several other ladies in town to plan her wedding. It would be a simple affair, held in the town church with a reception at the community hall. Katherine made her own dress, pale ivory silk with lace trim, working on it in the evenings by lamplight. Brett visited as often as his ranch work allowed, which was nearly every day. Sometimes he simply watched her teach, standing at the back of the classroom with a soft smile on his face. Other times they would have dinner together, or take long rides out to the ranch where Brett was preparing a house for them. The ranch house had been functional but sparse when Katherine first saw it, built for a bachelor's needs. Brett threw himself into making it a home, adding curtains Katherine sewed, a larger kitchen table, and a bookshelf he built himself for her growing collection of books. "I want you to be happy here," he told her as they stood in what would be their bedroom, looking out over the land. "I want this to feel like home." "Anywhere with you will be home," Katherine assured him. As Christmas approached, the excitement in town was palpable. Katherine's wedding would be the social event of the season. Her students made decorations for the church, and the families brought gifts: quilts, preserves, tools, practical items to help the newlyweds start their life together. 3 days before the wedding, Katherine taught her last class before the Christmas holiday. The students had prepared a surprise for her, a program of recitations and songs they had practiced in secret with some of the mothers. Katherine sat in her chair at the front of the room, tears streaming down her face as she listened to her students recite poetry and sing carols. When they finished, young Emma came forward shyly and presented Katherine with a gift from all the students, a beautiful leather-bound journal for her to record her thoughts and memories. "Thank you," Katherine managed, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you all. Teaching you has been one of the greatest joys of my life." After the students left, Katherine sat alone in the quiet schoolhouse, thinking about how much her life had changed in just a few short months. She had come to White Oak seeking purpose and adventure. She had found that and so much more. She had found love, community, and a place where she truly belonged. Brett found her there, as he always seemed to know when she needed him. "Are you all right?" he asked, sitting beside her on the desk. "More than all right. I am happy, truly happy, in a way I never knew was possible." "3 more days," Brett said, taking her hand. "3 more days and you will be my wife." "I cannot wait," Katherine said honestly. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, perfect December weather. Katherine woke early at the hotel where she had spent her last night as a single woman. Mrs. Miller and several other ladies arrived to help her dress, exclaiming over the beauty of her gown and arranging her hair with sprigs of holly and evergreen. "You make a beautiful bride," Mrs. Miller said, her eyes misty. "Brett is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Katherine said. The church was packed when Katherine arrived, holding a simple bouquet of winter greenery tied with white ribbon. Brett stood at the altar in his best suit, and the look on his face when he saw her walking down the aisle made her heart soar. The ceremony was traditional, with Reverend Thompson presiding. Brett's voice was strong and sure as he recited his vows, promising to love and cherish Katherine all his days. Katherine's voice only wavered slightly as she made the same promises, meaning every word with her whole heart. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Thompson declared. "You may kiss your bride." Brett pulled Katherine into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, to the delight of the congregation. When they broke apart, both grinning, they turned to face their community as Mr. and Mrs. Brett Galloway. The reception was a joyous affair, with music, dancing, and more food than seemed possible. Katherine danced with Brett, with Josiah Martin, with several of her students' fathers. She laughed until her sides hurt, ate cake until she was pleasantly full, and felt loved by everyone around her. As the sun began to set, Brett pulled her aside. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Galloway?" "More than ready," Katherine said. They rode out to the ranch together on Brett's horse, Katherine sitting in front of him, wrapped in his arms and a warm blanket. The winter air was crisp, but she felt warm, safe, and happier than she had ever dreamed possible. At the ranch house, Brett lifted her from the horse and carried her over the threshold, as tradition dictated. Inside, a fire was already burning in the hearth, courtesy of one of the ranch hands. The house glowed with warmth and welcome. Brett set Katherine down gently, his hands lingering at her waist. "Welcome home," he said softly. "I am home," Katherine agreed, reaching up to cup his face. "Wherever you are, that is my home." Their first kiss as husband and wife in their own home was tender and full of promise. When Brett picked her up again and carried her to their bedroom, Katherine went willingly, ready to begin this new chapter of their life together. The first months of married life were an adjustment, but a happy one. Katherine had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, so different from the structured schedule she had kept in town. She rose before dawn to make breakfast for Brett and the ranch hands, spent her days tending the house and planning lessons for when school resumed in January, and fell into bed exhausted but content each night. Brett was patient and kind, teaching her about the ranch, including her in decisions, treating her as a true partner. They worked together, played together, and loved each other with an intensity that never seemed to dim. When school resumed after the new year, Katherine returned to teaching with renewed energy. She rode to town 3 days a week, staying with Mrs. Miller on those nights, and spent the rest of her time at the ranch. It was a demanding schedule, but she thrived on it. Winter gave way to spring, and the land came alive with color. Katherine discovered she was pregnant in late March, and Brett's joy was boundless. He became even more protective, insisting she rest more, worrying over every little thing. "I am not made of glass," Katherine protested, laughing as he fussed over her one evening. "No, but you are carrying our child. That makes you precious beyond measure." Their son was born in November, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Matthew, and he became the center of their world. Katherine took the winter off from teaching to care for Matthew, but by the following spring, she was restless to return. Brett's mother-in-law, who had moved to White Oaks to be near them, offered to care for the baby on the days Katherine taught. Life settled into a new rhythm, busy and full and rich with meaning. Matthew grew into a curious, energetic toddler, exploring every inch of the ranch. The Broken G prospered under Brett's management, the herd growing steadily. When Matthew was 3, Katherine discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the baby was a girl born in early spring. They named her Rose after Brett's mother, and she had Katherine's delicate features and Brett's stubborn determination. The years passed in a blur of joy and occasional hardship. There were difficult seasons when drought threatened the ranch, and years when cattle prices were low. But Brett and Katherine faced every challenge together, their love and partnership growing stronger with each trial overcome. Katherine continued teaching until Matthew was old enough to start school himself. On his first day, sitting in his mother's classroom, Brett rode into town to witness the moment. He stood at the back of the room just as he had all those years ago, watching Katherine teach their son with tears in his eyes. More children followed. Another son, James, when Rose was 4. Then twin girls, Grace and Hope, born when Katherine was 37 and Brett 41. The ranch house that had once seemed so spacious was filled with laughter, noise, and love. Brett proved to be a wonderful father, patient and playful, teaching his children to ride and work the ranch, but also emphasizing the importance of education and kindness. Katherine watched him with their children and fell in love with him anew each time. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Brett surprised Katherine with a party at the community hall, the same place where they had first danced together. Many of the same people who had witnessed their courtship and wedding were there, older now but still friends. As they danced to a slow song, Brett pulled Katherine close. "Do you remember the last time we danced here?" he asked. "Of course. It was the night you told me you loved me, the night you proposed. Do you ever regret it?" Saying yes so quickly, marrying a cowboy, living this life instead of staying in Boston or finding someone more refined. Katherine pulled back to look at him, startled. "Regret? Brett, you gave me everything I never knew I wanted. Adventure, purpose, love, family, a home. I regret nothing. I love you, Katherine Galloway, more today than the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." "And I love you," Katherine said, kissing him gently. "Always." The years continued to roll by. The children grew up, each finding their own path. Matthew took over much of the ranch management, working alongside his father. Rose married a teacher from Santa Fe and moved there, though she visited often with her own children. James went to college back east, studying law, but returned to White Oaks to practice. The twins, inseparable as always, opened a dress shop in town that quickly became popular. Brett and Katherine grew old together, their hair turning silver, their faces lining with age but their love remaining constant. They sat on the porch of their ranch house in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the New Mexico sky in brilliant colors, their hands entwined. "You remember the day we met?" Katherine asked one evening when they were both in their 60s. "Every detail," Brett said. "The way you looked when I opened that coach door, frightened but brave. The way the sun caught your hair, the determination in your eyes. You saved me that day, not just from those bandits, but from a life that was too small for me. You showed me what life could be." "No, Katherine. You saved me. I was just going through the motions before you arrived. You gave me purpose, love, a family. You made the ranch a home." He squeezed her hand gently. "I have never regretted a single moment of our life together." "Nor have I," Katherine said softly. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in twilight. Around them, the sounds of the ranch settled into evening quiet. Inside the house, they could hear voices as Matthew and his wife prepared dinner, their grandchildren playing some game that involved much laughter. This was the life Katherine had chosen when she said yes to Brett Galloway all those years ago. This was the legacy they had built together. A thriving ranch, successful children, grandchildren who would carry their values into the next generation, and a love story that had become legend in White Oaks. The town itself had grown over the years, becoming more civilized, more prosperous. But some things remained constant: the vast New Mexico sky, the rugged beauty of the land, and the sense of community that bound people together. Katherine had long since retired from teaching, but her impact on the town lived on. Many of her former students had gone on to successful careers, some even becoming teachers themselves. The schoolhouse had been expanded twice to accommodate the growing population, but it still stood on the same spot where Katherine had first begun her work. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the town threw Brett and Katherine a celebration. It seemed like the entire population of White Oaks turned out, along with people from neighboring towns. Their children and grandchildren organized the event, decorating the community hall with flowers and photographs chronicling Brett and Katherine's life together. 40 years, Brett marveled as they stood in the midst of the celebration, surrounded by loved ones. Where did the time go? "Into every moment we lived fully," Katherine said. "Into every challenge we faced together, every joy we shared, every child we raised, every day we woke up side by side." Their eldest son, Matthew, stood to give a toast. "My parents' love story has been an inspiration to all of us," he said, his voice carrying through the crowded hall. "They have shown us what it means to commit to someone, to work together through good times and bad, to build a life of meaning and purpose. Dad, Mom, thank you for the example you have set. May we all be so lucky in love." As everyone raised their glasses, Katherine felt tears on her cheeks. Brett gently wiped them away with his thumb, the gesture so familiar after 40 years of marriage. "Happy tears?" he asked softly. "The happiest," Katherine confirmed. They danced that night, moving slowly to the music, their bodies fitting together as perfectly as they had 4 decades before. Brett's back was not as straight as it once was, and Katherine's steps were not as light, but their connection was as strong as ever. "Remember when I told you I would ride with you to town?" Brett said as they swayed together. "That first day when I promised to keep you safe. I remember everything about that day," Katherine said. "I meant it then, and I mean it now. I will ride with you wherever you need to go, for as long as we both shall live." "And I will ride with you," Katherine promised. "Always." The celebration continued late into the night with stories and laughter and music. When it finally ended, Brett and Katherine rode home to the ranch together, just as they had on their wedding night 40 years before. The land was dark around them, lit only by starlight, but they knew every inch of the way home. In the years that followed, they slowed down gradually. Brett handed over more of the ranch operation to Matthew, though he still rode out each day to check on the cattle. Katherine spent her time with her grandchildren, teaching them to read, telling them stories, passing on the values she held dear. They had lived good lives, full lives, and when Brett finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Katherine was beside him, holding his hand as she had for so many years. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half the territory. Brett had been respected and loved, known for his integrity, his fairness, and his devotion to his family. Katherine stood strong through the service, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, taking comfort in the knowledge that Brett had lived well and died happy. After Brett's death, Katherine moved into town, to a small house near the hotel where she had first stayed so many years ago. Mrs. Miller had long since passed, but the hotel was still standing, still welcoming travelers to White Oaks. Katherine spent her remaining years writing, recording the story of her and Brett's life together. She wanted their grandchildren and great-grandchildren to know the love story that had begun with a rescue on a dusty road and had lasted a lifetime. She wrote about the fear she had felt when those bandits attacked, and the relief when Brett appeared. She wrote about falling in love, about their courtship and wedding, about building a life together. She wrote about the joys of raising children, the challenges of ranch life, the deep satisfaction of a partnership built on love and respect. She wrote about Brett's kindness, his strength, his gentle heart. She wrote about how he had saved her, not just once but every day, by loving her, by believing in her, by being her partner in all things. And she wrote about love itself, about how it could transform lives, create families, build communities. How it could take a frightened schoolteacher from Boston and a lonely cowboy and give them a story worth telling. Katherine lived to be 82, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. When she passed away quietly one spring morning, the town mourned her as they had mourned Brett. She was buried beside her husband in the White Oaks Cemetery, overlooking the land they had both loved. On her headstone, beneath her name and dates, their children had inscribed a simple phrase: "She rode with him into a life of love." The Broken G Ranch continued to thrive under Matthew's management, passed down through the generations. The ranch house where Brett and Katherine had raised their family was preserved lovingly, filled with photographs and mementos of their life together. In White Oaks, the school Katherine had taught in for so many years was eventually replaced by a larger, modern building. But the old schoolhouse was preserved as a museum, dedicated to the memory of the town's first female teacher and the impact she had on generations of students. The story of Brett and Katherine became part of local legend, told and retold over the years. The cowboy who saved the schoolteacher, the love that blossomed from danger and grew into something beautiful and lasting. Parents told it to their children as an example of true love. Young couples invoked their names when making their own wedding vows. And on quiet evenings, when the sun sets over the New Mexico landscape, painting the sky in brilliant colors, locals say you can sometimes see two figures on horseback, riding together toward home. A cowboy and a schoolteacher, their love transcending even death, riding together for eternity through the land they loved. It was a love story for the ages, born in violence and fear, but growing into something pure and true. A testament to the power of love to transform lives, to create meaning, to build something lasting in an uncertain world. Brett and Katherine Galloway had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would endure for generations. Their story, beginning with a desperate situation and a brave rescue, had evolved into a beautiful life, filled with all the joys and challenges that make life worth living. They had proven that love does not need months or years to take root. Sometimes, in a single moment, two people can recognize in each other the missing piece of their own soul. And when they are brave enough to reach for that connection, to nurture it and let it grow, they can build something extraordinary. From that first day when Brett opened the stagecoach door and found Katherine inside, frightened but unbroken, to their last days together in the home they had built, their love had been the constant thread weaving through everything. It had sustained them through hardship, multiplied their joys, and given meaning to their lives. The promise Brett had made to ride with Katherine to town had become a promise to ride with her through life. And he had kept that promise every single day until his last breath. And Katherine, the schoolteacher from Boston who had come west seeking purpose, had found far more than she had ever imagined. She had found love, adventure, family, and a home in the wild, beautiful land of New Mexico. She had found Brett, and in finding him, she had found herself. Their story ended not with tragedy but with fulfillment, not with regret but with gratitude. They had lived well, loved well, and left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask of a life? In the end, the story of Brett and Katherine Galloway was a story of hope. Hope that even in the darkest moments, salvation can come. Hope that love is real and powerful and worth fighting for. Hope that two people, committed to each other and to building something meaningful together, can overcome any obstacle. It was a story of the American West, of the men and women who carved lives out of harsh land, who built communities in empty spaces, who refused to let danger or difficulty stop them from pursuing their dreams. But most of all, it was a love story. Simple, pure, and true. The kind of love story people tell their children and grandchildren. The kind that inspires and uplifts. The kind that proves love is not just a fleeting emotion but a force powerful enough to shape destinies and change lives. And so the story of the cowboy who saved the schoolteacher, who fell in love at first sight, who built a life and legacy together in the wild New Mexico territory, lived on. Not just in the memories of those who knew them, but in the very fabric of White Oaks itself, woven into the history and heart of the town. Their love had been a beacon, showing others what was possible. Their commitment had been an example, demonstrating the power of partnership. Their life had been a testament to the fact that true love, once found, can weather any storm and emerge stronger on the other side. From the moment Brett Galloway pulled open that stagecoach door and saw Katherine Blake for the first time, their fates had been sealed. Two souls meant to find each other had done so against all odds, and from that chance meeting, or perhaps it was fate, they had built something beautiful and lasting. A love story for the ages. A romance born in the Wild West, forged in danger and hardship, but ultimately triumphant. The story of Brett and Katherine Galloway, the cowboy and the schoolteacher, whose love had been strong enough to build an empire, raise a family, and create a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And whenever someone in White Oaks spoke of true love, of partnerships that lasted, of the kind of romance that only comes along once in a lifetime, they thought of Brett and Katherine. The cowboy who had promised to ride with the schoolteacher to town, and had kept that promise for more than 40 years. Their story had begun with the words, "I will ride with you to town," and it had ended with a love that transcended time itself. They had ridden together through life, through joy and sorrow, through triumph and tragedy, always side by side, always partners, always in love. It was the kind of love story people dream of, the kind that restores faith in romance, the kind that proves love is worth fighting for, worth believing in, worth everything. And in White Oaks, New Mexico, on quiet evenings when the stars shine bright and the wind whispers through the desert, Their love story lived on, eternal and unchanging, a reminder of what is possible when two hearts find each other and refuse to let go.